Is former Utah big man Keba Keita the answer to BYU's front court depth issues under Kevin Young? We're talking about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto around the network is your team every day, and as such, this is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. We are brought to you today by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more, with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Think about that, my friends. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And Keba Keita, as many thought and predicted and hoped, would enter the transfer portal after Chris Burgess' hire at BYU yesterday became formalized. It did happen. News broke early on Thursday, I guess technically afternoon, that Keba Keita had entered the NCAA transfer portal, and as such, will be looking for a new place to play basketball next season. Now, some out there thought that that was a mere formality, that he would come to BYU to be coached up by Chris Burgess. That is not the case. Based on conversations I have had with people, Keba is going to go through the process and really get a feel for what his worth is on the open mark when it comes to NIL, and he'll make his decision. Does BYU have an opportunity to land him? Absolutely. When Chris Burgess was his position coach for the past 2 years, and the two have developed a very, very close relationship, that is absolutely going to be a boon to helping BYU out. The question that remains for me when it comes to BYU, and if they do land Keba Keita, is he exactly what BYU needs at the 5 spot, or they still need a true 7-footer in the middle of this squad? That's the big question, because Keba stands 6'8". He's listed at 6'9" in some circles. He has north of a 7-foot wingspan. So he, like his fellow countryman and potential new roommate / teammate Fousseyni Traore, they are both guys from Mali who are shorter than their wingspan suggests. Fous is listed at 6'5" or 6'6". He has a 7-foot wingspan. Keba Keita, same situation, 6'8", north of 7 feet. I've heard it's rumored between 7'2", 7'3", 7'4", somewhere in that range. So their wingspan makes up for their lack of height. The one thing about Keba Keita, and a couple of you pointed this out, and actually not pointed out, but yes, the question on social media when the news came out and we were going back and forth on our Locked On Cougars Twitter account, is Keba the new Atiki Atiki? I'll tell you this much. Keba Keita is the Atiki Atiki that BYU hoped they could develop in 2 or 3 years' time. Atiki never became what BYU hoped he could be. Keba is more of that, and even has more prowess, I feel like, than Atiki ever did. He's able to jump like Atiki. He's built unlike Atiki. He's an absolute Mack truck. Think about like a more defined version of Fousseyni Traore. If any of you watched BYU play Utah last season, you saw Keba Keita just absolutely physically impose himself on that game. He is an incredible defender with a really uncanny ability to time his ability to block shots. I really like what he brings to the table. And a lot of people out there saying, well, he only played 16 minutes last year. Well, he was the backup to Brandon Carlson. And any of you know anything about Utah basketball, Brandon Carlson is the one redeeming factor, it feels like, in the past 3 to 4 years for the Utes. So when you're his backup, that's obviously going to not necessarily have you play a ton of games. He started 13 a year ago. And if he were to come to BYU, I very easily see him getting a major uptick in minutes played for BYU. The only question I have if Keba does come into the BYU basketball program is he can, with an expanded role, if that is absolutely what BYU plans on, if he does decide to sign with BYU and transfer to Provo, Can he keep his foul issues under wraps? He averages north of 5 fouls per 40 minutes, and many of you know that college basketball is a 40-minute game, and 5 fouls, you foul out. If you are averaging that over 40 minutes, that is not ideal for your chances of having extended periods of time on the court. I am sure that BYU would be very keen on making sure that he avoids that, but the thing about it is, Tiki Aleatiki, if you go for his per 40-minute totals, he fouled an even higher clip than Keba Keita. So I'm not trying to denigrate or tear down a Tiki Aleatiki as he goes and finds his next stop. I'm just saying that a lot of you said, well, is this a Tiki Aleatiki, just a new form of him? No, this is like an upgraded, souped-up version of a Tiki Aleatiki who actually can stay on the court, it feels like, and impact a game at a higher level than what AAA was able to offer to the BYU basketball program. I still believe BYU would do well to go out and find a 6'11", 7-foot big man, a true big man to have on the roster, because there are some squads in this Big 12 conference that are just absolutely huge in terms of their front court. And I get that Keba is 6'8" and has a 7'4" wingspan, but guess what? When a guy is standing 7 foot, he's got 4 inches on Keba, that's just a mismatch. We've all seen it with Fousseyni Traore at times. He's been overwhelmed by guys who are taller than him. So I don't know how you necessarily would kind of massage that and figure it out, because remember last year, Tiki Aleatiki kind of took a back seat to what Foose as well as Ali Khalifa were doing in the front court for BYU. Can you find a way to get all 3 equal minutes, or at least keep them happy if you were to bring another center in to the BYU basketball program? But maybe it just very well be that Kevin Young doesn't necessarily care as much, by the way, for a true 7-footer. He is a guy who has been in the NBA where it's more positionless basketball. You want guys who are rim defenders. You absolutely need guys who can do that. Notice that Keba brings to the table. He's a true 5-man. There's no real outside game to speak of with him. He is going to be firmly planted in the paint, both offensively and defensively, but his prowess, his physical nature, and his overall ability to just track and block shots, lends itself to being a thing that BYU could utilize if he ultimately is the only big that BYU brings in via the transfer portal. But let me remind you, he's going to get offers from a number of other programs out there. There's going to be some pretty crazy NIL packages, I'm sure, put in front of him, and BYU can absolutely put what I would consider a very competitive NIL package in front of him in their own right, but they're going to have to sell him on it. So I do think that Chris Burgess' hire is absolutely going to give BYU a leg up in this competition, but it is not a done deal that it was a formality. He enters the transfer portal, and a couple days later he announces he's going to BYU. Keba is going to go through the process, see what is best for him, and then make that decision. But I do feel confident, and I think BYU should feel confident in what they can sell him on. And the hope is if he does pick BYU, he is what BYU hopes he can be, and that is the rim running / rim protecting big that BYU can utilize in a 4-out, 1-in alignment and really just attack teams here in the Big 12 next year. So I really would be in favor of him coming to BYU. I think Keba is absolutely a physical freak of nature. You look at him, he looks like Superman. That's the thing about it. He's just so incredibly physical. And it'd be a very nice addition, I think, to BYU's front court. But they're going to have to obviously do their homework, make sure that they have a compelling pitch for him, sell him on the vision for the program. But if you've had his position coach join the staff, that absolutely, I think, gives you a major boost in your chances of landing this young man. Now, another major boost to the BYU basketball program came in the form of Doug Stewart officially being announced as BYU men's basketball's new, just essentially central hub. Essentially, he's going to run everything for BYU basketball that Kevin Young is going to handle. His formal title will be Chief of Staff. What all does that mean for BYU basketball? What does it mean for Doug Stewart? We're talking about that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We're taking a pause for a moment here to talk about more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about this a lot, Jake, but there's so much good stuff in this game. Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's many more things to get. Unique stickers you can trade to friends to complete your albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and also hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you decide to turn tail and absolutely own them in the game as well. Monopoly also feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of their own unique mini games are included, including digging for treasure on a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events to help you win big, massive prizes and multipliers for everything you want when it comes to Monopoly Go. There's always something new to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it free on Google Play or the App Store. And let me remind you guys, it's time to game on. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Are you sick of watching ESPN or Fox Sports and hearing all the talking going on? I want to encourage you guys to check out Locked On Sports Today. It's a 24/7 streaming channel program for you with all the biggest stories, but doesn't have the nonsense it feels like from all the other screaming talking heads on the other networks. The best part is it's available 24/7 on YouTube or the Amazon Fire Free TV Channels app. Would encourage you guys to download it or check it out today. It's a great way to get caught up on the news of the day as well. All right, BYU men's basketball formally announced the hire of Doug Stewart as BYU's new chief of staff under Kevin Young. I think this is a very savvy hire, and let me explain what a chief of staff is for BYU basketball. Some of you may be thinking, okay, if he's not on the coaching staff, what is a chief of staff going to do? The chief of staff essentially handles everything behind the scenes, and a big part of it in this day and age is managing the NIL funds. That is a major part of this. Doug Stewart has a really unique background. He has spent 2+ decades as an assistant coach working at places like Tulane, Nevada. Where else did he work in the past? He's also worked in the NBA, and that's how him and Kevin Young originally crossed paths. Here's the thing. The last 2 years, he moved over to the administration side of things at the University of Nevada, Reno, and was serving as, if I can get this right here, the Assistant Athletic Director for Development in Nevada, where he was named one of the 50 Rising Stars Associate Athletic Directors by Silver Waves Media. Here's the thing. He has been working both as a coach and now as an administrator for enough time that I think he understands the whole totality of what NIL, the transfer portal, and what the current landscape of college athletics is going to look like for collegiate basketball programs. And he's bringing that wealth of knowledge to BYU to bolster what is already, I think, a solid staff under Kevin Young. And that's only with 2 assistants hired, Brandon Dunson and Chris Burgess. Kevin Young is compiling a lot of people around him who are going to help him ease into the transition of having only coached really 1 year of collegiate basketball in his coaching career. He is obviously going to have a learning curve to pick up the nuances of what college basketball is versus what he experienced both of the D, G, and also the D and G League, as well as his time in the NBA. Doug Stewart absolutely understands what it takes to obviously work from the administration side of things when it comes to a university with NIL. He'll be able to help kind of bridge that gap between Kevin Young and BYU administration in terms of understanding, okay, here's what we're looking for, here's what we're wanting to do. The other thing is he has been a coach, so he understands in terms of having to sell the vision you have for an athlete out on the recruiting trail to bring them in. He is recruited at a very high level at a number of stops in his career, and the thing about it is he's also a guy who is going to be able to help with a lot of the administrative issues that will pop up as Kevin Young adapts to life as BYU men's basketball head coach. So this is a very, very savvy hire, and it shows also there's an added just element of investment in BYU basketball. I have seen some of the discourse online amongst some of you saying that, is BYU trying to become a basketball school? I actually don't think so. It's my personal opinion. I think BYU's history, 50+ years of football excellence by and large, a national championship in that, whereas the men's basketball program has that ignominious streak of being the most NCAA tournament appearances without a Final Four appearance. It's 34 of the appearances without a run to the Final Four. So the success level in football has gone higher and obviously to the top versus basketball that has absolutely struggled the past 30 years. Remember, the only time BYU has advanced past the first weekend or the first round of the NCAA tournament is 2011 when Jimmer Fredette was running things for BYU. So it's been a really interesting ride for BYU basketball. I think that the administration at BYU understands that they have an opportunity with basketball playing in as high a level as the Big 12 Conference is to obviously elevate everything they're doing within that basketball program. It's been very evident. Chris Burgess, yeah, he's getting a raise he was making over $285,000 at Utah. He doesn't come to BYU for less than that. He's making more than that. Kevin Young reportedly is making north of $4 million. The Church News would have you believe that BYU administrators, whoa. We're not actually, you can say whatever you want, BYU. You may not be paying him that $4.2 million out of your own pockets, but guess what? There are boosters making up the difference. The coaches circle, the AD circle, that type of stuff is what makes up that. BYU may be paying a fraction of what the overall compensation package is, but don't say that it's been overblown. We all know what the reporting is. We have it on very good authority from multiple sources that that's the number. The investment in BYU basketball is absolutely awesome, and it's evident by what Doug Stewart is going to be doing here for BYU. I don't think at any point in BYU basketball history they've had a chief of staff like Doug Stewart on staff. They've never filled out a full 5-man assistant coaching pool, and I expect BYU will fill out the final 3 slots and give Kevin Young the full allotment of assistant coaches that even Mark Pope didn't have last year with just 4 assistants on the bench alongside him. So there is a lot going for BYU in this circumstance, and I look forward to it. And the nice part is Doug Stewart, like I said, brings a wealth of knowledge to help Kevin Young adapt to life as a Division I basketball coach. We've talked about Brandon Dunson kind of being that hungry go-getter when it comes to the recruiting trail, whereas Chris Burgess, he comes to BYU, and he's the guy who's already worked in the BYU administration / university aspect and understands what it takes to get guys into school at BYU, also what kind of guys fit at BYU, and obviously his recruiting ties are unparalleled in many respects as well. So it's a very, very nice collection of guys around Kevin Young right now, and if you're a BYU fan, you should be very, very excited about how BYU is going about building this program up. They had an incredible run last year under Mark Pope. There's no if, and, or but about it. It was a very disappointing and bitter end to what was obviously a great season with that first-round exit, losing to Duquesne. But BYU essentially saw the success they had with the investment they put in last year, and they are doubling down, if not more than that, when it comes to the investment in this BYU basketball program. There's a correlation across college sports. The more money you put into a program, traditionally, you're going to get better results out of that. And BYU is putting the money in right now. They're putting the money where their mouth is. It's something I have harped on for years on this podcast. Any of you who are longtime everydayers with us here on the podcast know what I'm talking about. I have lamented the fact that BYU had done more with less, and they were proud of that fact for so long. I coined the term a couple of weeks ago, and I know Mark Parrish, who I had lunch with not too long ago, he loves the phrase, do more with more. And that's what I believe BYU is trying to do right here. They're hiring guys like Doug Stewart to come in and bolster this BYU basketball program. The investment in the BYU athletic department across the board, it feels like, is going to go up, but obviously your revenue-generating sports, most notably football and men's basketball, they should get the lion's share of that investment, and it appears on the basketball front, they're absolutely doing that, and I wish nothing but the best for Kevin Young, Doug Stewart, and the rest of the BYU administration as they move forward here, because I really do like what BYU is doing, and I think that investment, the ROI on it, yeah, it kind of depends on what you consider an ROI, the return on an investment is, but here's the deal. I think BYU has really found themselves in an advantageous position. They don't want to lose the momentum they created their first year in the Big 12. Frankly, let's be honest. Was the BYU men's basketball program maybe the most successful program or athletic department program in the Big 12 in their first year? It'd be hard-pressed not to say anybody else. I know that women's tennis made the NCAA regionals for the first time since 2007, so congratulations to them. We also had BYU women's soccer do some nice things, women's volleyball, but honestly, compared to what the expectations were for BYU men's basketball versus what the output was, 13th in the preseason poll, finishing 5th and being a single-digit seed in the NCAA tournament, I think it's a pretty masterful job that BYU and Mark Pope put together. And the BYU administration, after Mark Pope left, said, you know what? We're not backsliding. We're forging ahead. We're putting more money into this program, and we're going to build on what we already have. And the nice part is the transfer portal has already benefited from that. If Keba Keita joins the fray, if Jackson Robinson decides he wants to come back for another year, all the better, and that means that even more opportunity for BYU. This is a program that is sitting in the upper echelon of the Big 12. Can they stay there? That is the big question, and obviously that'll be proven over the coming months as BYU gears up for year 2 in the Big 12 in basketball, but I do appreciate what the BYU administration has done here. They are they're letting Kevin Young build this program in the way that he wants to build it. And it sounds like, and based on paper, everything I'm seeing, it's all kind of coming together, and it's a really, really nice what am I trying to say? Now, it's a really nice set of parts that's being put together right now, and we'll see what the other parts are. 3 more assistants to be hired, and we'll see ultimately when it's all completed what it looks like. But so far, so good for BYU men's basketball. And once again, welcome to Doug Stewart as he joins the BYU administration, BYU basketball administration, as their chief of staff. All right, coming up here in a minute, we'll finish out today's show. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. There's some movement on a lawsuit that is the NCAA is facing with a multi-billion dollar payout. Well, there's some changes that are coming with that we detailed a little bit yesterday, but even more changes that were not already revealed that could affect BYU and the future of college athletics. We'll dig into that coming up next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys if you want to get out to the NBA playoffs. We've had some absolutely incredible series. Think about what happened with the Knicks last night, sending the 76ers packing. We also had the Bucks get eliminated, and Patrick Beverly throwing a basketball at a fan. What are you doing, Pat Bev? But nonetheless, if you want to get out to the NBA playoffs games this year, you want to use our friends over at Game Time. It's an authorized ticket marketplace for the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Think about that. They got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets and gets you out to wherever you want to go to watch these games. There are some absolutely thrilling first-round matchups. It's only going to get better as time goes along. So take advantage of the opportunity you have with our friends at Game Time. They have last-minute ticket deals, flash deals, zone deals. They're easy to find and buy your NBA tickets and every other kind of event in your area, no matter what you're looking for. So take the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets once again with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, please join our Locked On Cougars Insider group if you are so inclined. Link in the show notes below wherever you're watching and or listening to this. What it is, it's a great way to interact with the show, with myself personally. Comes to your phone via a text message. Think about it. It's as simple as it can be in terms of getting updates from me and obviously interacting with myself. If you want to do that, there's a 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you, and then just $5 a month after that. I think it's $4.99 and change, but appreciate all of you who have signed up so far and looking forward to continuing to build it out. And if you're so inclined, once again, click the show link below. Let's put it this way: cheaper than Coup Connect. Let's put this. I'm just saying, it's $5 versus $10. Hey, it might be worth checking out. But nonetheless, we will do our best to keep you apprised of everything going on with BYU. All right, we talked about it yesterday that there is a lawsuit pending that the NCAA is trying to essentially settle out of court because they don't want to be up for potentially $4 billion in back payments to athletes. And the issue is with this new deal potentially being negotiated, and it's not done yet. The current payout from the NCAA is near $2.9 billion under the settlement, and the problem is it could cost each power program, which BYU is one of now, $300 million over the next decade. Yes, a lot of money could be coming out of the coffers for BYU, but it wouldn't be going right to the plaintiffs. It wouldn't be going right to the NCAA. There's a significant chunk of it, of that $30 million, that would be revenue sharing for BYU athletes if BYU opts to go with this. The number we talked about yesterday is around $20 million. Well, the latest reporting from Yahoo and Ross Dellinger, who's, by the way, killing it on this, is that the figure assumes the school meets what is believed to be, number one, so they're talking about the 10-year settlement, which could cost each school as much as $300 million over the decade, or $30 million a year. It includes number one, a $17 to $22 million revenue distribution cap for athletes. So that number could be the cap, $17 to $22 million to share with your athletes. Now, the schools would be able to decide to spend lower or share lower amounts of money with the athletes, but the cap, the most you'd be able to spend, is between that $17 and $22 million. Number two, at least $2 million in withheld NCAA distribution for back damages. And then number three, as much as $10 million in additional scholarship costs related to an expansion of sports-specific roster size is a concept previously unpublicized. That's why I wanted to talk about this again today. What that entails is that, for example, college baseball, and trust me, some of you guys that watch and listen to this podcast, you know who you are. We've had interactions about this, are frustrated with the lack of support for BYU baseball. Currently, the NCAA mandates that you can have essentially 11 full-ride scholarships to disperse amongst 30-plus athletes in college baseball. Think about that. You're like, okay, how many guys are getting actual full rides? How many guys are getting books over here? How many guys are technically walk-ons? The situation is that added investment of $10 million could up the ante to essentially make that all 30-plus BYU baseball athletes, for example, would be on full-ride scholarships. That is the investment that's coming sports-specific. And what that is there could be an increase in football. There could be an increase in basketball. It also could be an increase in terms of the other quote-unquote Olympic sports, because baseball is just one of many that obviously have partial scholarships. The only sports that I am aware of, I think the NCAA mandates you have to have full rides, are football and men's basketball. Women's basketball might also have that, but regardless, there's a lot of money that's going to have to be forked over for BYU. Now, they do clarify here the schools will have opportunity to share millions in revenue with their athletes with an spending limit similar to a professional sports team's salary cap, and that estimate puts that between $17 and $22 million, although the amount could fluctuate. The figure was determined through a percentage, roughly 22% of an average Power 4 athletic department's revenue streams, most notably ticket sales, television contracts, and sponsorships. This money would be coming out of BYU athletics coffers to go directly to the athletes. Is this the end of NIL? That is to be determined. Like I said, this is still a pending lawsuit that is being negotiated between the NCAA, a bunch of power players in power conferences. And I just look at this and say, okay, if you're going to do this, how many universities are going to fork over that full allotment of $17 to $22 million, another $10 million in scholarships? And oh, by the way, already know that at least $2 million is going to be withheld by the NCAA to pay off their bills and the $2.9 billion settlement that they are obviously having to fork over in their own right. It's not an ideal situation because you think about that. That's nearly $40 million potentially. No, excuse me, not 40, $30 to $35 million of added investment needed essentially to continue to do what you're doing at the power level of college athletics. Is that money that BYU is going to be able to generate? Is that money that BYU already is allotting for in terms of their allotments from the Big 12 going forward in terms of making sure that, hey, we have to work at this number to be able to absorb this over here if it does come down that way? I am very interested. I said yesterday that I've got some concern that BYU may not be a willing participant in terms of going all in on this. But I've got to, and it also goes off a conversation I had with somebody else after I did my podcast yesterday. They believe that BYU would push all in to see what it looks like and then kind of reevaluate. We'll see what happens, but there is a lot of money sitting out there, obviously pending with this lawsuit, and if it does get settled the way it appears it might, it is going to require BYU to invest in an even higher level than they already have. Would that benefit BYU athletics? Well, I believe if, for those of you who want BYU baseball to be a bigger deal in the Big 12, well, having potentially 30-plus full-ride scholarships to recruit with, that would absolutely be a boost to BYU. The problem is the playing field would obviously allow their opponents out there to do that exact same thing, and that is the big question here about, okay, does BYU, do they feel like if they're on an equal footing with everybody that they can compete at the same level that they want to compete at? And by the way, how many other schools, not just BYU, are going to be willing to go all in at this level? And how many of them can afford to? That's the other thing about this. Not all power level programs are created equal. Sorry, Wake Forest, you're not Ohio State. Sorry, Vanderbilt, you're not Michigan. That's the issue, is you have true big dogs out there who have got infinite amounts of wealth. Look at Texas, look at Oklahoma. But for every one of them, it feels like you look and there's a Maryland over there, or there's a Rutgers. I'm using these as examples. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know the way I'm going with this. You have UCF, and it's nothing against any of the new schools coming into the Big 12, but they don't have the same budgets. And BYU doesn't even have the same budget as some of the big dogs in college athletics. The rich would get richer, as always. It's always kind of been that way. It's not ever going to be a complete level playing field. But if BYU wants to compete, why not push all in and maybe pass up some other teams and other programs and other athletic departments who don't have the resources to push all in? If you can do that, that could be maybe the meal ticket for BYU being more competitive than they ever have been before. But it's a very interesting dichotomy and a very interesting future for the NCAA, because revenue sharing is coming, folks. It is professional sports. If that turns you off, it turns you off, but that is what the future is going to be in collegiate athletics. It is no longer the farce of amateurism. It is long dead, and there are just more shovelfuls of dirt being dumped on its casket. So it's coming. Change, it's inevitable, and it is coming at a very fast rate. It feels like every single month we're hearing about a new thing with the NCAA and what they're going to do next. NIL over here, transfer portal there. Well, guess what? This now, another $30+ million investment needed annually, by the way, over 10 years. That's a 10-year, $300 million investment to stay, essentially, keep up with the Joneses. So, crazy times, and we'll obviously be tracking it right here on Locked On Cougars for you guys as well. All right, that's going to do it for this Friday edition of the show. A big thank you for all of your support. It's good to be back in the saddle after my vacation. We will be back next week. If crazy things happen over the week, we may do a weekend edition. You never know how things might go, but regardless, thank you for your support of the podcast. As always, please continue to share, download, rate, review, do all the things you do to support our growth here on the podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and obviously a big thank you to all of you for being everydayers with us right here on the podcast as always. And until Monday, or maybe before then, we'll talk to you guys again soon right here on Locked On Cougars.